G'day, hope you're all doing well. Pretty strong year 2025. I'd had Clair Obscur on my radar, and then I became incredibly keen for it once the release date trailer dropped. I had an inkling that the game was going to be special, and it still far exceeded my expectations. It was great to also see so many indie and AA games dominating the space and really showing how much creativity can come from even the smallest of teams. Righto, let's get into the games I finished. Obscur. I don't recommend this. It's a survival horror that can be played in co-op, and if a character dies, you're able to just carry on with the game. The premise is that the principal for the school has been experimenting with some sort of plant that infects things and is weak to light, thus making the creatures created from it weak to light also. In combat, you'll boost your torch to weaken enemies a little, very much like it's done in Alan Wake, and when not in combat, you're simply running from room to room, looking for keys and other items to progress the game. It's really lame at times, and the music, despite having some nice tracks, feels so out of place. It's a good soundtrack attached to a kind of bad game. Two things stuck with me after finishing it. It's short, and it gave me and my sister some good laughs due to its general goofiness. System Shock Remake. What a game. As far as I know, Night Dive kept any additions of their own to a minimum, which means a lot of what I enjoyed is straight from a 1994 game that was ahead of its time. The level design can seem a little overwhelming at first, but for me, I found myself growing very comfortable with it. There's no objective markers or map markers, so with a pen and paper, it became a lot of fun trying to piece things together myself, and I found that this also made me pay closer attention to the environment. Resource management can be very tight, and this creates some fun encounters where you're dashing in and out of cover, desperately trying to find an item that's going to help you out, or as a last resort, you just take out your melee weapon and go ham, hoping that you don't die. By the time I finished the game, I never felt like any one area overstayed its welcome, and I never got bored of the game because you're always on your toes, always searching for more resources, and some levels you have to come back to at a later point once the correct item has been collected. As Mandalore Gaming said in his review of the original game, it's basically a Metroidvania that predates the term itself. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I really enjoyed it. Exploration feels natural and is rewarding. The puzzles for the main quests are a little more on the easier side, but the side puzzles are really clever and fun to figure out. Combat and stealth is serviceable, nothing to write home about for me, though I did like things like the exaggerated sound effects from punching. I don't usually play games to full 100% completion, and I imagine trying to do that in this game would probably get a little tedious, because some of the side content is just repeated collectible stuff. But like I said, there is side content that has some really good puzzles in them. The thing I loved most about this game is that Machine Games managed to really capture that 80s vibe of the movies and did a great job of letting some of its more serious and emotional moments shine whilst still loading the game with enough fun and whimsy that perfectly emulates the trilogy. Voice acting is great, with a brilliant performance from Troy Baker as Indy and Marios Gavrilis, who gives a terrific performance as Emmerich Voss, and he just really commands your attention in every scene. You know you've got a damn good villain on your hands when you start wishing for more scenes with him. Definitely a standout in an industry already full of brilliant performances. Onimusha, Warlords. A hack and slash from Capcom that definitely shows its age in some ways whilst still showing some charm. Voice acting is very weak, I played it in English, and the story that's presented isn't terribly interesting, though I did like reading about the world through the journal entries that you can collect. Combat is simple and it can be made pretty trivial if you use the analog stick to move around enemies and easily avoid their attacks. If you're wanting to play an older series just for the appreciation of it, I would recommend this one, but stick with the tank controls using the D-pad to get the full and intended experience. It might feel dated depending on what games you're used to playing, but I felt like it actually plays really well. Worth noting as well is that the music was quite good, definitely a standout for me. Monster Hunter Wilds. If you enjoyed World, then you'll likely feel at home with Wilds. Gameplay is satisfying in terms of controls and feedback, but I definitely could have done without the low and high ranks being separated. I know that's just standard Monster Hunter stuff, but to be honest, I tapped out after rolling credits for the really bad story and unlocking high rank. I just cannot be bothered sitting through more fights, nor do I want to spend time collecting resources and items when I've already done all that in World and can just go back to fighting the endgame stuff there. There's still a couple of monsters in World that I actually never got round to defeating. Maybe I'll return at a later date, but after spending so many hours grinding away at World on PS4 and PC, I just do not have the drive to do it for Wilds. As per Capcom policy, they're taking the piss with DLC, and performance was fucking horrendous. I don't know what it's like now. Devil May Cry 5. Capcom shenanigans aside, what isn't great about DMC5? You've got great music, visuals, a set of characters that are fun to watch, though it does feel like Lady and Trish got sidelined a bit too hard, and best-in-class combat. I am not terribly great at these sorts of hack and slash games, but it really goes to show just how intuitive the controls are when I can play as Dante and fiddle around with the buttons, but still feel like I'm doing something cool and I'm also able to pull off some interesting combos. I can only imagine the excitement people had who took the time to master this combat system. Unboxing the Cryptic Killer, a cooperative puzzle game where you're relaying information to the other person. It is very short, with me and my sister completing it in about 2.5 hours, but it's also very cheap and really enjoyable. Some puzzles were real head scratchers, but your mileage may vary of course, depending on how good you are at puzzles. Emissary Zero. What I thought was going to be one of those Lethal Company clones or something, ended up being a fun cooperative experience. You traverse through this one level that opens up more and more when you complete more objectives, and you're trying to evade different types of enemies in the process. I think what made this fun for me is that there is a defined objective and an actual end you're trying to reach. Get a group together and you'll have fun with this, I'm sure. Celeste. Tight controls and level design, a touching story, great visual style, and a beautiful soundtrack. I can't recommend it enough, and it goes on sale for incredibly cheap. I think I bought it for less than $3 Australian, but even at full price, this is a must play. And don't let the difficulty get you down or anything. It can be hard, but it is also super forgiving, where you're given checkpoints constantly. You're never going to have a point in the game where you lose a massive amount of progress and have to traverse a whole section of the mountain again. All the levels are broken up individually and you get checkpoints every time. Ultima. Just a heads up that I played the port of this game through GOG. I did not touch the actual original version. As far as I know, not much changed other than it running faster and looking a little better visually. So it's still the intact old school granddaddy of video game RPGs. It's very much a product of its time when it comes to things like every single action having its own dedicated button on the keyboard and next to nothing really being explained to you. When traveling the overworld, I was imagining people back in the 80s drawing their own maps because nothing exists in the game to actually guide you. Despite not really being used to playing these sorts of older games, I actually really enjoyed it. The few sounds that exists are grating on the ears, and the final boss can be annoying, but as a foundation for the RPG genre as we know it for video games, it was interesting to experience this piece of history myself, even if I can't fully appreciate what it did the same way people would have when they played this for the first time in the 80s. Warhammer 40k, Space Marine 2. Possible spoilers if you haven't played it yet. I'm a bit mixed on this one, and I'll just give anyone listening a couple of seconds to maybe skip just in case the spoilers are going to be an issue for you. I did not enjoy the inclusion of chaos from a gameplay perspective, because switching to them as the main enemy kind of downgraded the combat loop. Visually, they look awesome. I absolutely love how they look. But with the amount of shooting focused troops, the game loses that more visceral, up-close combat, and the bosses aren't as fun to fight either. It felt like a better game without them. As per most 40k titles, it really nails the scope of the world, it looks beautiful, has acting that perfectly blends that like over-the-top theatrical style, and delivers it with complete sincerity. But story-wise, it felt a little too much like a retread of the first game. I'd say 3/4 of my time with the game was spent playing solo, so maybe that was a big factor that had me not vibing with the game as much. I'd absolutely encourage people to play this because I do recognize the great amount of effort and love put into it by the devs. Just be warned that at the time I finished the game, and even for a little bit at release, there were some bad connection issues. Maybe they're fixed now, I wouldn't know. Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This game is so special. Every single thing that was put into it comes together to deliver something that will stand out above other games for decades. Whilst I could have used a few quality of life improvements at the time of release, like a retry button for bosses, which did come later, and the ability to maybe save some builds, they are super minor annoyances that are completely eclipsed by how amazing the music is, the voice acting, the direction, writing, art style, visual design, even little things like the way they do eyes in the cutscenes. The actors are consciously looking in certain ways. There's just a certain look when it comes to the eyes that tells so much story by saying nothing. It's a truly wonderful game on all fronts that I could waffle on about for hours. Instead, I waffled on about it for about 10 minutes, so go watch my video on it. Doom: The Dark Ages. I felt very mixed with the Dark Ages and even leaned more towards negative before the gameplay update. When you're in a flow state, getting parry after parry, holding an enemy in place with a shield toss, and charging in to decimate a Mancubus with a super shotgun, it is absolutely fun and engaging. And the story, even though it's pretty bad, it can just be skipped, which I highly recommend. It's just that when I played it, there was a level of clunkiness to the combat at times. For example, switching weapons would lock you into the animation with no way to block or melee, so it made the dance you're trying to do with an enemy feel a little off. It didn't hook me in nearly as much as Doom Eternal. And to be clear, I don't think it's an issue that the game went for a different gameplay design. I really do respect the devs for going for something very different. A couple other things I didn't really like, which hasn't been updated as of yet, are the turret sections that just feel very out of place for these modern Doom games, flying levels with a dragon, and some mech battles. All three of these things result in some of the most boring aspects of the game without question. I will spoil an endgame boss, so here's your couple of seconds to maybe skip if you intend on playing it and don't want anything spoiled at all. You fight Cthulhu in a mech, and it's arguably the single most boring moment in the entire game. That's how much I disliked the mech sections. Like I was alluding to though, the game is in a much better state where the gameplay changes have just made it feel more fluid and made it more likely for me to jump back in a later date. If the mech and dragon sections could just be taken out entirely, either with an update for New Game Plus or a mod or something, I'd probably jump right back in straight away. Music-wise, it just really wasn't there for me. A couple of bass lines sounded like they were right out of the original games, and I did appreciate that. Otherwise, the soundtrack didn't have terrible music by any means. I enjoyed bobbing my head to some of it. It just pales in comparison to the masterpieces Mick Gordon gave us. Split Fiction. I found the game to be mostly fun, as is usually the case when playing even the worst games with someone else. The writing could be a little flat at times, with some dialogue just ruining its own delivery, either by way of odd sentence structure or undercutting a moment with a poorly done joke. On the gameplay side, I felt like there was a missed opportunity regarding the split of two different genres. Some of the set pieces are definitely enjoyable, but it's the very last stretch of the game that does something really cool visually and with some of the gameplay that I wish was more prevalent. And I also think it could have been interesting to see the two genres collide a little more to give some random mashups like a mech dragon or sci-fi broomstick. The gameplay function wouldn't change, but the game already has great visuals, so I feel like it would have added to the overall feel of the game. I can totally see these sorts of games being great introductions for people that don't play them as much and are simply joining in with their partner, sibling, parent, or whatever. Unsolved Case. A prequel to unboxing the Cryptic killer that only takes 30 minutes to an hour to complete depending on your competency level with puzzles. I should have played this first, but I just missed its existence entirely when I played the other game, so I decided to quickly polish this one off. It's okay, but it is free, so I'd say if you're at least the tiniest bit interested, grab someone to play it with and give it a go. And Roger. I won't say much, just because I think at a cheap price point and only needing about an hour to finish at most, just go play this game. It's sweet, filled with love from the team, and is just really well made and interesting. Bad Cheese. I was drawn to this for its 1920s Steamboat Willie visual style. It's about the only thing I enjoyed as well, other than the sometimes creepy and overbearing audio. And I mean overbearing in a good way. Gameplay consists of simply walking to each location and completing a task. Sometimes it's navigating a very linear hallway and hiding behind an object or two. Other times it's vacuuming up dead spiders. I just didn't really get anything out of this game. Baby steps. I enjoyed mastering the mechanics of the previous game, getting over it a lot more. I don't think I'll come back to baby steps and do its side quests or try to complete it faster, because there are massive stretches of walking, which is expected. That's the aim of the game, is to be walking around. It just became too much for me, to the point that the control scheme was beyond tedious, and I feel like if I played it for even longer, I'd probably give myself RSI. It's a shame, because when you're actually at the designed set pieces and not just walking across these empty plains, I had a lot of fun figuring out its controls. And I even had fun at the Manbreaker, despite being ready to rearrange my mouse into a million pieces. The last thing I'll say for the game is that I really enjoyed the humor. I think it was spot on. Frog Jump. A short jumping game that can be played with friends. Some sections do get a little tricky, and if you're feeling really brave, there's a hard mode to up the ante and remove how many points give you a checkpoint. There isn't too much else to say other than I had fun playing it, especially because I played it with other people and not just by myself. Silent Hill F. I'm very mixed on this. I think the slightly clunky combat and stamina management is fine, because at the very least it's thematic, and it never really got in the way of fighting bosses to the point where it felt like a chore. I just hated how it suffers from a problem a lot of other third-person games do, where the camera can become easily stuck in walls. I also think there starts to become too much combat, especially in the final roughly third of the game, where some of it becomes mandatory. Early on in the game, you're able to skip combat, but much to my disappointment, this isn't an open town that has the option to be explored stealthily. Despite being able to avoid a few enemies in the beginning, you're going to be dragged into combat one way or another. And you know, with something like bosses, yeah, sure, you have to fight them, obviously. I just wish there was a version of this game that didn't rely on combat so heavily. In terms of story, I quite liked Hineko's story. I think the overall themes were interesting and at times were done well. There's just an abundance of notes that spell things out way too plainly, to the point it becomes incredibly on the nose. More subtlety could have gone a long way. I personally don't like as well that a large amount of crucial story elements and basically the rest of the plot is tied behind New Game Plus. If I didn't have fun in the first playthrough, I'm certainly not going to play 3 or 4 more to see the rest of the story. Unreal Engine studies are here, as to be expected. On the positive side, there is some great art direction with really cool imagery of the red flowers against the town's gloomy presentation. I really like the monster designs. The vocal performances are good, especially Hinako's actress, and the soundtrack is terrific. I can't stress enough how much I enjoyed the music for this game, and even the sound design in general was excellent. I wish I knew more about Japanese folklore and mythology and whatnot, because I imagine there's a lot of symbolism and storytelling I'm just missing out on because I don't know anything about the significance of certain animals being so prominently shown, or even the meaning behind some shrines or items, and a lot more. Keeper. A simple game full of so much charm and love. Visually, it gets nicer and nicer to look at, especially on an OLED. Gameplay wise, there's not much going on outside of moving forward along a path and solving super simple puzzles to open doors, but I'll still happily recommend playing it. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. I'll refer to my video on this game. TLDR, it overstays its welcome by the 6-hour mark and continues on for another 10 or more. The combat is its best feature, but it's not enough to sustain what is otherwise a kind of bad game. Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelists of the Roses. The appeal of Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't there for me like it used to be circa 2003 to 5. What I've always enjoyed about this entry though is the gameplay loop of fighting across different land types and having to be aware of positioning. I found out though that the AI will just crumble if you push the shit out of them, so it can be a little easy to get victories with weaker decks. Once I got the one ending, I didn't spend any more time on it to do the other, and I wasn't really interested in collecting cards to 100% it. If this looks like it's up your alley, it's an old PS2 game. You know, if you're remotely interested, you might as well just download an emulator, access a copy, and give it a go, right? The Mortuary Assistant. Great fun if you're a baby bitch like me who struggles with horror games. For me, I wasn't overly interested in doing more runs to see the rest of the story past the 2 endings I managed to get, as the gameplay of cleaning out the bodies and prepping them and stuff, it just became a little annoying after the first couple. I still recommend checking the game out though. Dispatch. I really enjoyed my time with this game. Episode 1 didn't give me the most hope, as that episode's comedy felt a little too unserious. I was worried that was going to be an ongoing thing for the rest of the game. From episode 2 onwards though, that changed. It genuinely made me laugh many times. The acting across the board is great. The choices seem to have many different outcomes, and the animation is simply beautiful. I had a lot of fun with the gameplay sections where you're trying to find out who is the right person to send on the many jobs that pop up around the city. Overall, this game is definitely a recommend for me. Alright, that's the list done. For 2026, everyone and their mum is hyped for GTA 6. Not me though, I'm just gonna wait for the PC release, and in the meantime, I guess I'll let old school RuneScape suck the life out of me. Other games I've got my eye on though are things like Replaced and Mouse PI for Hire, which are coming in March, so that's exciting. I'm pretty keen to see how IO Interactive do with 007 coming in May. Control Resonant is allegedly coming this year, and I am very fucking hyped for that one. I love what Remedy do, and focusing on melee combat could result in some great gameplay on top of their masterful way of telling stories in strange and interesting worlds. Let me know what games you completed in 2025 and what you're most looking forward to in 2026. Until the next video, have a good one.